Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Smakarang Sapritai Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna and welcome. Thank you very much for your kind association. As we continue, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, last set of verses for this chapter. The Pandavas retire timely, verses 45 to 51. Om Jnanatime Vandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramatam Yena Tasme Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Tamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavenebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Shastra Piyusha Sarva Vaireka Satvala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Loka Triprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalidando Didaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prompt transfer fruit of all the Vedas, O you are enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions, O you grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actual of Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshasharayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. By reading you one attains transcendental bliss. For your syllables bring pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madheka Bandhu Matsangye Mangaro Mahadana Manishta Mad Bhagya Mananandana Mustute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. Sadhu Sadhu Tadahin Atini Chochataraka Hanamuncha Kada Chinmam Premna Ritkatyo Spura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O give us saintliness to the unsaintly, of love to bear it follow. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifested by heart to my throat. Accompany pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Janmadyasya Yathonvayaditaratas, Charte Swabhigna Swaraha, Tene Brahma Hidayadi Kavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya, Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatrati Sargom Risha. Damna Swena Sadani Rastakuakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudev, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he's the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destructions of the manifested universes. He's directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he's independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed in illusion as one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universe is temporarily manifest by the reactions of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existing and transcendental abode, which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayanopayasha Sabya Kalavasmin Yuge Jana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagyo Padrita. O learned one in this iron age of Kali, many but short lives, the quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayana Namaskritta Narachevam Narotamam Devi Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance on the personality of God in the divine. Andu Narendra Rishi, the supermost human being, and Mother Saraswati, goddess of learning, and Shila Vyasa, the author. Savaipum Soparo Dharmo, Yato Bhaktira Doksha, Ohituka Prati, Hata Yayatma Supricity, the supreme occupation Dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service under the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Jana Yatyu Savairagyam Yanam Chayad Ahitukam, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of God, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causes knowledge and detachment from the world. Vedanti tattvavidas tattvam yat gnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth calls non-dual substance Brahman Paramatma Bhagavan. Shri Shroshadhanasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchisyan Mahatsabaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the message of Vasudeva. Shranutam Swagata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Reddantastoya Bhadrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of God, who is Paramatma, supersoul in everyone's heart and the benefactor to the true devotee, cleanses desire from material enjoyment. From the heart of the devotees develop the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastaprayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavata Uttamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nishtake. By regular tenets in the classes of Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to pure devotees, all that is troublesome of the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service under the personality of God, and who is praised or transcendent song is established an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the National Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna and welcome again. Let us cover some feedback. Anyone has any feedback from last week's session regarding verses 32 to 44? Please share that in the chat. Archana City says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, from our Yudhishthira's example, we can learn that when our loved ones leave, we must contemplate on Bhagavad Gita because the knowledge found in Bhagavad Gita gives solace to the heart. Yes. Wonderful lesson that Yudhishthira Maharaj is teaching us. The words and the knowledge that is there in Bhagavad Gita really soothes the heart, especially when we associate with the truth. That truth heals the heart. When we understand what happens to the soul, what happens to our loved ones, it's like if you on a journey, you can be on a journey where you know exactly where you're going and what the future holds, or you can be on a journey where it's completely unknown. The journey where there's where you're completely unaware of the future of what this destination holds, what the journey holds, right, is more fearful and anxiety-ridden than a journey where you know all the touch points of that journey. So Bhagavad Gita is teaching us and revealing to us the journey of a soul, both from perspective of his karma, the past, the perspective of the present, and the perspective of the future. And it's also revealing to us that even if someone in our family who may not be Krishna conscious, who may not be connected to the Lord, but if they are connected to someone who is connected to the Lord, that itself is a blessing. And how to also increase their unknown devotional credits so that their journey going forward is bright. And that is very wonderful. That is very wonderful. That no matter who the person is, we can always increase their devotional credits. I call it depositing, transcendental EFT. No matter where they are in the universe, we can do a deposit, a transcendental EFT, just through their photograph, just through remembering them. So in this way, by following the footsteps of Yudhishthira Maharaj, remembering the verses of Bhagavad Gita, it definitely relieves the heart. Mother Sharanya says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance and appreciation. No matter how degraded Kali Yuga becomes, there will always be opportunity to engage in Krishna consciousness service. Yes. It is described that when the Lord appears, he really appears to give opportunity. No matter what the state of the planet is, no matter what the condition of the planet is, there is always the opportunity to serve. And what is also important to appreciate and understand is that it is not about the outcome of the service. Krishna is not interested in the outcome of the service. In fact, Krishna already knows the outcome. He's not interested in the outcome. He's interested in the intention of service, the attitude of service, the quality of service. So you could be rendering service. Let's say someone has the great intense desire to serve, but they are not so expert in that field. But the intensity and the sincerity of that service is genuine. And they engage in that service with that sincerity, with that quality of service, simply to please the Supreme Lord. And the outcome may not be as desired, externally or materially, but the Lord will still be pleased because of the sincerity and the intention of that service. So looking at the internal quality of heart is really more important than the external result that may manifest. So yes, Kali Yuga provides, every age provides the opportunity to serve. Even in the greatest danger, we always have the opportunity to serve the holy name by glorifying the holy. So we should never forget. In Nectar Devotion, Srila Prabhupada says that no circumstance can check the rendering of pure devotional service. No circumstance. As long as you are able to think, you can even render all your services in your mind. That's the power of the mind and the power of devotional service. Thank you very much for the feedback. We also touched on Srila Prabhupada in his purports shared through the example of Yudhishthira Maharaj. He was dutiful as an emperor, and he rendered exceptional service dutifully as a king, as an emperor, with the proper consciousness that everything belongs to the Lord. And at the appropriate time, he detached himself from that engagement to prepare for surrendering completely to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to go back home, back to Godhead. And Prabhupada shares that we have to become purified of all our anarthas, impurities, if we want to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nonetheless, says Yudhishthira Maharaj shows the process to follow in preparation to leave the world, retracting from the senses, etc., and the material conception of life. Good example to follow. Yes. Very important to keep that in mind. every single one of us are getting closer and closer. Every day, every hour, every minute, we are getting closer to that point where we need to make the decision of detachment. If we are already convinced that, yes, I want to go back home, I want to perfect my life, then when that critical time comes, we will not hold on. We will understand what we need to do at that point in time. So very, very important that we need to prepare. We need to, especially on our deathbed, especially at the moment of leaving this world. As long as we hold on, we will have to take birth. So we want to not prematurely detach. We want to dutifully serve according to our Varna and Ashram. At the same time, we want to cultivate Krishna consciousness, remembering the Supreme Lord, becoming attached to the Supreme Lord. In this way, when the time comes, the mind is now matured, the mind is ready to take that next step in closing one's eyes and then opening the eyes and seeing Krishna. So we have to prepare now. This is preparation stage. And we have to be diligent in our preparation for the simple reason we don't know the date. This is even more astounding. That nobody knows when they're going to die, yet nobody prepares. It's like telling a student you're going to be writing your final exam this year, but we're not going to tell you the date. And they carry on happy-go-lucky like nothing's going to come end of the year. But a serious student will start preparing from day one. And at least just after mid-year, he's prepared. Because before mid-year, he knows that no, there cannot be any exam because the teacher said at the end of the year, somewhere close to the end. So somewhere close to the end would mean that it's going to be after 6 months. So in this way, they always prepare and they're ready. So we also have to be prepared. We have to heed and prepare. Let us now proceed. So we're going to be covering 41, 45 to 51. And the other Pandavas, Draupadi and Vidura, also depart. Text 45. Sarvetam anu nirjagmur bratar krita nischaya kalinna dharma mitrena drishtva spruta rajabhuvi. The younger brothers of Maj Yudhishthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. So we see the Pandavas, the brothers, were very, very surrendered to Yudhishthira Maharaj. They were like, even though there were 5 personalities, they were like one. They were always obedient and followed the elder brother, Yudhishthira Maharaj. Whatever he decided, whatever decision he made, they were obedient to that decision. So when they saw that Yudhishthira Maharaj has decided to give up his life and return back home, back to Godhead, they decided to follow in his footsteps. Another interesting point in this verse is that Kali Yuga had already spread, and the influence of Kali had already affected the citizens of Ayodhya, citizens across the globe, practically in every pilgrimage place, in Hastinapur, in Delhi, in other parts of the world. Kali had already gained force. Why? Because Krishna has left the planet. And because Krishna has left, naturally Kali gains more strength. So already symptoms were there prevailing throughout the world. And that is also revealing in that when there is strength in association, we should take full advantage to shield ourselves through that association, so that when that association leaves out of from our physical presence, so to speak, then at least we have taken advantage of that association so that we can stand on our own 2 feet and be protected from Kali. We see that also when Srila Prabhupada was physically present. In the association of Srila Prabhupada, it was very, very easy to be Krishna conscious. Just by Prabhupada's purity and potency, you felt completely empowered and your narratives were completely at bay. Practically just like you felt like that you had no narratives. You could do anything. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada leaves, now your true colors will surface. And therefore, those that had taken full advantage and followed Srila Prabhupada's instructions diligently, they were able to sustain that disappearance of Srila Prabhupada by continuing to follow his instructions, taking association as Vani, etc. Because no doubt, having Srila Prabhupada's physical association and not having his physical association, there would be a vast contrast in that experience. Prabhupada in this purport says, the younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira were already obedient followers of the great emperor, and they had sufficiently been trained to know the ultimate goal of life. Note, they had been sufficiently trained. Prabhupada is training us all. We are in a school of training. Just as the Pandavas were sufficiently trained, we also cannot give the excuse, oh, I didn't know I must think of Krishna. When the time comes, there is absolutely no excuse, because Prabhupada is training us through his purports so comprehensively. It is inconceivable how much training Prabhupada is sharing through his Bhaktivedanta purports. Prabhupada has given us the process. He has given us all the instruments and the paraphernalia required. He has built temples to give us that association. He's put everything in his Bhaktivedanta purports in a language that we can understand, systematically, exhaustively. He has covered every aspect that we need to be trained. So there's absolutely no excuse. Therefore, they decidedly followed their elder brother in rendering devotional service to Lord Shri Krishna. According to the principles of Sanatana Dharma, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished. and must engage himself in self-realization. But the question of engaging oneself is not always decided. Sometimes retired men are bewildered about how to engage themselves for the last days of life. Here is a decision by the authorities like the Pandavas. All of them engaged themselves in favorable culturing of devotional service of Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Swami Sridhar, Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha, or fruit of activities, philosophical speculation, and salvation, as conceived by several persons, are not the ultimate goal of life. They are more or less practiced by persons who have no information of the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is already indicated by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 1864. And the Pandavas were intelligent enough to follow it without hesitation. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja. One has to surrender to the Supreme Personality of God. This we have to be fully convinced, and we have to be ready to accept without hesitation. When there's hesitation, it implies some doubt, it implies some resistance. That means some attachment is there when there's hesitation. So we don't want any hesitation. When the time is right, and yes, it may be a little difficult, but when we dare to open the door, we should not hesitate. We should not be like Tukaram's wife. When the spiritual aeroplane came to pick up Tukaram, Tukaram went to his wife and said, let's go, come. And she said, no, who's going to look after my buffalo? And that buffalo wasn't even giving milk. So she was worried about objects of this material world. So we don't want to be attached in this way, especially when the time arrives. We want to be prepared. So we want to prepare our consciousness now. We need to question ourselves. Put that question in your consciousness. That if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, arrives right now, if Prabhupada appears right now to you, and he tells Krishna or Prabhupada tells you, okay, spiritual master comes and says, okay, let's go. You ready? Taking you home now. If that opportunity was there right now to say, let's go, are we ready? Or are we going to say, can I just charge my cell phone? Can I take my computer with? Can I do this, do that? Can I take this? Wait, I still have to do this. Nope. We have to be prepared in our consciousness. And that preparation can only be there when we're convinced of what does it mean to return back to the spiritual eternally in the service of Krishna. We have to understand that this life is a training ground. You do not stay in school forever. You have to grow out of schooling. You can't be a practitioner or a student always. There has to be that transition from being a student to actually application, applying what we learn. So very important to create that consciousness, start cultivating that consciousness. That yes, when the time comes, it may be difficult, but I need to transition from the material world, from the material universe and all its objects. I need to transition to the real world, the spiritual world, my eternal home. They say home, sweet home. Yes, that's our home, sweet home. Nothing as satisfying, as anxiety-free as that home, where we truly belong. So we really want to take full shelter of the Supreme Lord. And we want to practice that surrendering process even now. When we're chanting, when we're rendering service, when we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, when we associate devotees, that is all part of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of God. And the more we are becoming attached to that, that's a sign that I'm becoming healthy. The more I am seeing that I'm developing an indifference to the world, matter, objects of this material world, I'm becoming aware of my attachments to the material world. I'm seeing the anarthas visibly. I'm identifying them as obstacles. That means I'm moving in the right direction. I'm progressing. 46. Te sadhu krita sarvarta gnatvat yantikam atmana manasadaryam asu vaikunta charanam bhujam. They all had performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of the Lord, lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna, are the supreme goal of life. Therefore, they meditated upon his feet without interruption. Manasa Darayam Asu Vaikunta Charanam Bhujam. Manasa Darayam. Darayam. Darayam means to hold. So we want to hold the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord in our mind. When we chanting the holy name, it's practicing retention, because the mind is chanchala. So when we chanting, we want to retain, practice retaining the holy name, the lotus feet of the Lord, the form of the Lord in our mind. The longer we can retain, the more purifying it is, and the greater the blessing. Because the mind is very flickering, mind is very flickering. And to even just hold a thought is very, very difficult, especially related to the Supreme Lord. So we have to practice. And here we see the Pandavas, they had a powerful mind, that they could direct the mind to the lotus feet of Krishna, and they could hold it there without interruption. That is why in Kali Yuga, we have to be very careful of instant gratification. And we also have to be very careful of the cell phone, for example. The objects and inventions that come in Kali Yuga, the objects and inventions that come in Kali Yuga are designed for distraction. So we want to understand that we can use technology in the service of Krishna, but also be careful that it does not distract and disturb our devotion. For example, scrolling through Facebook. It's giving you, or it's disturbing the mind by you scrolling through the different posts. The mind is focusing, defocusing, focusing, defocusing, focusing, defocusing, focusing, defocusing. And that becomes a habit if one is not able to control and direct the mind. So we have to be very, very careful. That is why you find, especially with children, they become more and more distracted. They can't sit one place because already from the beginning, this distraction is there. And it disturbs one's consciousness, one's psyche. So we want to be able to sit, absorb, focus, absorb, and retain. So that when the time comes, I'm able to pass the time of death, still focusing on the Supreme Personality of God. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in Bhagavad Gita 7:28, the Lord says that only those who have done pious deeds in previous lives and have become free from the results of all impious acts can concentrate upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. The Pandavas, not only in this life, but also in their previous lives, had always performed the supreme pious work, and thus they are ever free from all the reactions of impious work. It is quite reasonable, therefore, that they can concentrate their minds upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. According to Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, Dharma, Artha, Kam, Moksha principles are accepted by persons who are not free from the results of impious actions. Such persons affected with the contamination of the above four principles cannot at once accept the lotus feet of the Lord in the spiritual sky. The Vaikuntha world is situated far beyond the material sky. The material sky is under the management of Durga Devi, or the material energy of the Lord. But the Vaikuntha world is managed by the personal energy of the Lord. Personal energy of the Lord is Srimati Radharani. So it does require piety. It does require devotional credits. And therefore, practicing daily is key. See, it's not something that we can just, like a switch, you just switch on, switch off. No, it requires cultivation. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anushilanam. Anushilanam means it has to be practiced, it has to be cultivated. So we need to cultivate taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, taking shelter of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. We want to cultivate. It's a cultivation, practice, cultivate. And as you cultivate and practice, then it becomes habit, becomes second nature. So without cultivation, just depending on the mercy of the Lord, that is risky. So we have to daily cultivate every single day. We want to remind ourselves and we want to cultivate and practice, remembering the lotus feet of Krishna, remembering the holy name. Any form of the Lord, any feature of the Lord, any pastime of the Lord, we need to cultivate. So the Pandavas, because they were doing this regularly, not only this life, but even previous life, it became second nature. Text 47 and 48. Tadyano driktaya bhaktya vishuddha dishana pare tasmin narayana pade ekanta matayo gatim avapur duravapamte asadbir vishayatman bir vidut viduta kalmashashtanam vrajenat maneva he. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attained the spiritual sky. which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayan, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of Lord Shri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely cleansed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies. How glorious, how wonderful. So very, very wonderful verse, 2 verses. Thus, by pure consciousness. So this is the first qualification, pure consciousness. Our consciousness needs to be pure. Then how are we going to purify that consciousness? By constant devotional remembrance. When we're engaging in devotional service, we need to be conscious who we're rendering that service to. That is why it's not just about the service. Where is your mind in that service? Are you actually conscious and thinking that I'm actually rendering the service to the Supreme Lord? And are you thinking of the Supreme Lord? Or are you mechanically doing the service, whatever that service may be, whether it's chanting, cooking, cleaning, whatever that service is, you're rendering the service, but your mind is somewhere else. Like they say, absent-minded. You are physically present, but your mind is absent. Your mind is somewhere else. So we don't want to be physically present in the service with our mind somewhere else, because it is not your physical presence that's going to dictate where you go next. It's your mind that's going to determine where you go next. Therefore, Krishna emphasizes, Man mana bhavamad bhakto. Think of me, engage your mind in thinking of me. Why? Because it is the state of the mind that will determine your next destination. So we want to be able to remember the Supreme Lord constantly through the practice of devotional service. And in the next sentence that says, this is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. So that same aspect of constant remembrance without deviation and pure consciousness, cleanse of all material contamination. Because of the state, they were not absorbed in anything of this material world. This allowed them to go back home, back to Godhead, in the very same bodies. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, a person freed from the 3 modes of material qualities, namely goodness, passion, ignorance, and situated in transcendence, can reach the highest perfection of life without change of body. Srila Sanatana Goswami in his Hari Bhakti Vilas says that a person, whatever he may be, can attain the perfection of a twice-born Brahmana by undergoing the spiritual disciplinary actions under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. Exactly as a chemist can turn gunmetal into gold by chemical manipulation. It is therefore the actual guidance that matters in the process of becoming a Brahmana, even without change of body, or in going back to Godhead without change of body. Srila Jiva Goswami remarks that the word he used in this connection positively affirms this truth. And there is no doubt about this factual position. The Bhagavad Gita 14:26 also affirms the statement of Jiva Goswami, when the Lord says that anyone who executes devotional service systematically without deviation can attain the perfection of Brahman by surpassing the contamination of 3 modes of material nature. And when Brahman perfection is still more advanced by the self-same execution of devotional service, there is no doubt at all that one can attain supreme spiritual planet of Goloka Vrindavan without change of the body. As we have already discussed in connection with the Lord's returning to his abode without change of body. So returning back to the spiritual world in the same body, that is possible. Dhruva Maharaj did that. The Pandavas did that. The Lord did that. Now, even if we are not as fortunate, still it does not matter, because we will still get our spiritual body through the practice of devotional service. So the process does not change. Whether we go back home in the same body or not, both those who engage, those who go in the same body and those who do not go in the same body, the process to go back home does not change. Constant, unwavering, unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God. Now, it may take one life, it may take 1 billion lives. It does not matter. What matters is how soon can we become convinced? How soon can we become 100% convinced? Like Prabhupada would say, are you sincerely practicing Krishna consciousness? That sincerity, that conviction that this is it, this is it, this is what I need to do. So we want to come to that stage of full conviction. And when you come to the stage of full conviction, then perfection is reached. Now, what happens after that conviction, that is immaterial. That is immaterial. As long as we are convinced that my life is meant for pleasing the Supreme Personality of God, my life is meant for 100% rendering of devotional service to Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita. When I'm convinced of that, now I leave the result to the Supreme Personality of God. My goal is service. What the result is, what the outcome is, that is up to Krishna. Krishna may take me in the same body. He may take me now, he may take me later, he may take me after 1 billion lifetimes. It doesn't matter. The conviction and surrender is already achieved. Krishna may decide, no, I want the exchange of devotional service as he desires. In this body, in the conditional stage, with challenges, without challenges, immaterial of the circumstance. The success is the sincerity and the conviction and rendering our service as purely as possible. Then the outcome is natural. It's a consequence which naturally bears fruits. Just like a gardener, he simply has to sow the seed and cultivate it. He doesn't need to worry about the signs of growth. How is it? Will it grow? How is it going to grow? How is the seed going to germinate? How is it going to pierce the ground? How is it going to synthesize, photosynthesize? How is it going to? No, doesn't need to worry about the science, chemistry behind that. No, he just needs to sow the seed, water it, make sure there's sunshine, remove the weeds, and harvest, cultivate. And as soon as he cultivates the seed in this way, Krishna makes the arrangements that the seed will fructify, become a plant, become a tree, and bear fruit. So like that, we simply have to cultivate this seed of devotion and become convinced of who I am, what is my relation with the Supreme Lord, what is my relation with this world, how am I conditioned, and how do I become free from this conditioning? 49. Viduropi parityaja prabhashe deham atmana Krishna veshena tachita pitribi swakshayam yayo. Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhasha because he was absorbed in thought of Lord Krishna. He was received by the denizens of Pitraloka, where he returned to his original post. Purport. The difference between the Pandavas and Vidura is that the Pandavas are eternal associates of the Lord, the personality of Godhead, whereas Vidura is one of the administrative demigods in charge of the Pitraloka planet and is known as Yamaraj. Men are afraid of Yamaraj because it is he only who awards punishment to the miscreants of the material world. But those who are devotees of the Lord have nothing to fear from him. To the devotees, he is a cordial friend, but to the non-devotees, he is fear personified. As we have already discussed, it is understood that Yamaraj was cursed by Manduka Muni to be degraded as a Sudra, and therefore Vidura was an incarnation of Yamaraj. As an eternal servant of the Lord, he displayed his devotional activities very ardently and lived a life of a pious man. So much so that a materialistic man like Dhritarashtra also got salvation by his instruction. So by his pious activities in devotional service of the Lord, he was able to always remember the lotus feet of the Lord, and thus he became washed of all contamination of a Sudra born life. At the end, he was again received by the Lord, by the denizens of Pitraloka, and posted in his original position. Demigods are also associates of the Lord without personal touch, whereas the direct associates of the Lord are in constant personal touch with him. It's a beautiful definition of a demigod and an associate of the Lord. The demigods are also associates of the Lord, but without personal touch, whereas the direct associates of the Lord are in constant personal touch with him. The Lord and his personal associates incarnate in many universes without cessation. The Lord remembers them all, whereas the associates forget due to being a very minute part and parcels of the Lord. They are apt to forget such incidents due to being infinitesimal. This is corroborated in Bhagavad Gita 4.5. So we want to be in the association of the Lord and in touch with the Lord. We want that personal touch. We want to be in touch with the Supreme. That aspiration must be there. We want to desire that. When we're chanting the holy name, we want to chant the holy name with the desire to be in service, in personal touch with the Lord. When we're rendering devotional service, we want to render service and be in touch with the Supreme Lord. We don't want to be associates like the demigods, doing our duty, being associates, but not having that personal touch. And Prabhupada, through the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we are able to get that personal contact, that personal touch, that personal association. That is the benefit of serving in disciplic succession connected to Srila Prabhupada through the previous acharyas. Because we are connected to those who are very closely in touch with the Supreme Lord. See, one can render service from a distance, and one can render very close, intimate service. So we are blessed that we are connected to those associates of the Lord, those direct associates of the Lord who are very, very closely in touch with the Supreme Lord. You could say the closest. The closest associate to serving Krishna is Radharani, Mother Yashoda. And Lalita and Vishaka are the next closest associates of Radharani. And then the Manjaris are the next closest associates. So the Goswamis and our Acharyas are the Manjaris very closely associated with Srimati Radharani serving Krishna. And if we are now connected to Srila Prabhupada, who's intimately connected to them, Acharyas in our line who are personal associates, Manjaris of Radharani, then no doubt we are personally associated and personally in touch with Krishna. So like that, we should also reflect on that good fortune. And to come in contact with such personalities takes inconceivably number of years, innumerable number of births, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of births to be able to come in contact with such personalities. There's an analogy given that for us to come in contact with a personality like Srila Prabhupada, what does it take? So the analogy is given that the probability of us coming in contact with a personality like Srila Prabhupada is equivalent to the probability of a turtle swimming in the middle of the ocean, comes for some air, and when it's coming to get some air, it so happened that its head gets lodged into a log that has a hole in the center. And the turtle brings its head up and gets lodged into that log. But that log has to come from a tree that was grown on the shore, and that tree has to be a neem tree from which that log has to be broken or dislodged, which then is pulled into the middle of the ocean for this turtle to put its head through. So that's the probability of getting somebody like Srila Prabhupada. Now, if we analyze the probability, we see that it's improbable. Why? Because firstly, for a neem tree to grow on the shore of the ocean is not possible. And even if it was possible for a neem tree to grow on the beachfront, on the shore, for that log to break away from the neem tree, it has to rot. Neem tree itself is antiseptic, so it cannot rot. Then even if it does rot and it falls to the ground, for the waves to suck it to the center of the ocean is also unlikely. And then for that log to have a hole in the center is also unlikely. And then finally, for that turtle to be in the middle of the ocean, at the same time for that log to be in the middle of the ocean and to put its head up in the center of the hole is also very, 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 very unlikely. But that's the probability of us getting Srila Prabhupada. And we no doubt have the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, his association, his guidance. And therefore, we should be very, very grateful just for that. What about everything else Srila Prabhupada sacrificed his life for us in so many ways. We should be grateful. We should contemplate and remember that. And if we are genuinely grateful, then we will start taking those lessons to heart and applying it in our life. And in this way, bear the fruit of what Srila Prabhupada desires. And that is to regain the personal touch of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 50. Draupadi cha tadad gnaya patinam ane pekshatam vasudeva bhagavati yekanta matir apatam. Draupadi also saw that the husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. So Draupadi and Subhadra were fortunate, having the association of Krishna, knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they were also well prepared. So this is another lesson. We should be prepared, and we should also prepare those around us. Now, those around us may not be Krishna conscious. We have to accept that. But at the same time, it does not mean that we cannot prepare them. Our duty is to prepare them and to share the knowledge with them. Our duty, or we cannot force them to take to Krishna consciousness. What we can do is tell them that when the time comes and I'm leaving this world, then simply facilitate my journey. Make it as Krishna conscious as possible so that I can remember Krishna and leave. That will be the best thing you can do for me, and it will even be the best thing you can do for you. Krishna will always protect those who take shelter of him. So how are we going to survive? How are we going to live without our loved ones, etc.? Whether it may be difficult or not, we simply have to depend on Krishna. We have to surrender to Krishna and depend on Krishna. It may be difficult for us, but that faith we have to have in Krishna. He will make arrangements. He will make arrangements. I remember when we left the temple and we had to settle outside. That month that we had to settle outside was not easy, especially when we left Lansdowne. And even though we were, shedding tears in terms of how we're going to survive, but the Lord made arrangements. And we're still here. So we have to have the faith. And in those situations, in fact, that's a blessing, because when you're chanting, when you're crying, you're genuinely crying. You're desperate. It's not like you just pretending, okay, Krishna, I'm crying now. No, you're genuinely crying. So it's actually a blessing. And we see Krishna makes arrangements. And even if Krishna didn't make arrangements, still your crying wouldn't have gone in vain, because you are thinking of Krishna with genuine emotion, with genuine sincerity, crying and begging Krishna's mercy. So again, the outcome is immaterial. It's the process or the state of consciousness of depending on Krishna, crying to Krishna. So Draupadi, Subhadra, Mother Subhadra, Srimati Subhadra Devi, they were very happy in the fact that they internally they could understand, yes, if the Pandavas are doing this, we're going to follow in their footsteps. And it's interesting, the husbands, here it's described that they followed the path or the path of sacrificing, the path of surrendering to the Supreme Lord without caring for her. And Draupadi didn't go into this emotional cycle of, oh, how could they not think of me? You know, their husbands, they're supposed to be protecting. No, she didn't go into that. She didn't get trapped into that. She was also retrained. Yes, time has come. Time has come. Throughout, you know, the other situations we find in the Mahabharata, she could raise this question, why didn't you people think of me? Why didn't you people protect me as husbands? But at this point, she did not go into that mentality. She could understand, yes, I need to also do that. And immediately, they became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same destination. So wonderful lesson we can learn. Prabhupada also shares a very, very, very important purport. When flying an airplane, one cannot take care of other planes. Everyone has to take care of his own plane. And if there is any danger, no other plane can help another in that condition. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. This is very, very important to understand. We have to be convinced of this. Keep this analogy in your consciousness. We're flying our own plane. Everyone at the time of death is flying their own plane. No one is going to help you. But Prabhupada makes it very clear. The help is, however, offered on the ground before flying in space. Similarly, the spiritual master, the father, the mother, the relatives, the husband, and others can all render help during one's lifetime. But while crossing the sea, one has to take care of himself and utilize the instructions formally received. Beautiful and wonderful. So it's not that it's not that you don't get help. You will be helped by so many. Probably helping us right now. He's giving us the help. How to become perfect pilots. So that when you have to take off, and what is the takeoff? Death. The time of death is the takeoff. And now when you take off, you can't say, oh, I don't know how to fly the plane. You're going to crash it. You're going to come back landing in South Africa. So we don't want to take birth again. We don't want to crash the plane. We want to take that plane and fly through the material sky, right through Viraj River, right through Vaikunta, right through Ayodhya, right through into Goloka Vrindavan. So we have to learn. The lessons are there on the ground. And not when you're flying. Everybody flies their own plane. Solo. Draupadi had 5 husbands. And no one asked Draupadi to come. Draupadi had to take care of herself without waiting for her great husbands. And because she was already trained, she at once took to concentration upon the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The wives also got the same result as their husbands in the same manner. That is to say, without changing their bodies, they reached the destination of God. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur suggests that both Draupadi and Subhadra, although her name is not mentioned herein, got the same result. None of them had to quit the body. So this preparation we have to give our family members. We don't need to preach to them. We just share the analogy. And it's our duty as family members to share the experience, the realization, and the wisdom of life to our dependents. Whether they take it or not, it's up to them, but it's our duty to share. So we share. Dear family members, please understand. We have a session, one night session, you call them. Today, tomorrow, before it's late. We're going to have discussion about life. Life is like flying an aeroplane. And if I'm in my aeroplane and you in your aeroplane, and now let's say we take off. Now we're flying. And let's say you have issues, something happens in your plane. Can I, who is also flying this plane, help you? No. Because it means I need to come out of my plane and get into your plane. But your plane is flying. I can't jump from my plane into your plane. So that means that when I'm up in the air and when you're up in the air, you're flying, each one is flying each other's plane, we cannot help each other. But if they are on the ground, then we can help each other. You may not know how to read the cockpit, so I can come and show you how to read the cockpit. I can show you, you can even go into a simulation and practice how to fly, etc. So on the ground, we can share and instruct. So right now we're on the ground. We all here, we have not died. We have not experienced death right now. We are not experiencing death right now, even though we're all dying at each moment. But the crucial time of death has not arrived. Therefore, I'm sharing this example that it is important to understand that when death comes, meaning flight is now off the ground. No help can be given. Now you are on your own. And what do you do? How do you fly that plane? What does it mean to fly that plane? Well, Draupadi, Srimati Subhadra Devi, Pandavas, headed by Yudhishthira Maharaj, Queen Kunti, Vidura, Srila Prabhupada himself, they're all teaching us. What does it mean when the plane is off the ground? It means to not look back, to not worry about the ground, to not worry about somebody else in the next plane. Prabhu just see he's not flying the plane properly. Yeah, you're going to go right down. If you worry about somebody else's plane, don't worry about how they're flying. Or you see how someone is, they're taking the plane straight up and then they're taking the plane straight down. And now you talking about, and what, your concentration is now on what they're doing. You're going to crash your plane. So don't worry about how others are flying the plane. Let them fly the plane how they want to fly. You, the pilot of your plane, you fly the plane in the way Prabhupada and our acharyas want you to fly the plane. We're all independent. We all have minute independence on how you want to fly our plane. Some people want to crash the plane. Some people want to do stunts. Whatever they want to do. Some people want to take a detour. Some people want to stop in the heavenly planets. Let them do what they want to do. You need to be convinced. We need to be convinced where we want to fly this plane. Where do we want to land this plane? We want to land this plane at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. Therefore, we want to get our mind focused on the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna, on the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, on the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, spiritual master. And in this way, by focusing our mind on the lotus feet of these personalities, we will safely land in Goloka Vrindavan, in Navadvip. And that is the perfection. That is the goal of life. Cultivating pure devotional service, loving service to the Supreme Personality of God. And all the instructions, all the guidance by the spiritual master, by the father, by the mother, by the relatives, by the husband, and all others can render help during our lifetime, not when our lifetime is ending. Because when it's ending, it means lift off. And your plane will lift off, whether you like it or not. You can't say, Krishna, I'm not ready. I still need to go into the simulation. Can you give me some more extra? Nope, no extra time. Whether you learned how to fly or not, that plane is lifting off. And when that plane lifts off now, it's going to fly wherever your mind is taking it. So therefore, controlling the mind, focusing the mind during chanting on the lotus feet of Krishna, remembering the holy name, absorbing, is very, very important. It is practicing to fly this plane. 51, last verse. This chapter concludes with a Shruti-fal. What is the blessing? What is the benefit of hearing this chapter, hearing the glories of the Bhagavatam? And here the Shruti-fal is given. Yat shradayai bhagavat priyanam pando sutanam iti samprayanam shrunotyalam swashtya yanam pavitram labdva haro bhaktim upaidit siddhim. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. So there is blessings in every chapter, in hearing the glories of the Lord, of his associates. It is devotionally auspicious and perfectly pure. So hearing about the glories of Krishna, about the glories of the devotees, we should not underestimate the power, the potency. Oh, I'm just wasting my time. No, we're not wasting time. This is how time should be used, to constantly hear the glories in association of devotees. Prabhupada says, Srimad Bhagavatam is a narration about the personality of Godhead and the devotees of the Lord, like the Pandavas. The narration of the personality of Godhead and his devotees is absolute in itself, and thus to hear it with a devotional attitude is to associate with the Lord and constant companions of the Lord. By the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead, without failure. So in Prabhupada's instructions and words is the blessing, is the potency, it's the benediction. In previous ages, consider in Satya Yuga, you had to perform austerity for 60,000 years. Without a cell phone, without the family members, without home, without being around family members. And if you broke that meditation, you start again. And in Kali Yuga, all we have to do is hear the glories of Krishna and his devotees. Hear Srimad Bhagavatam, hear Bhagavad Gita, hear Chaitanya Charitamrita, hear the glories of the Supreme Lord. What devotional faith, what devotional attitude. See, one can hear without the proper attitude, but cultivating the proper attitude, that is very, very important. So just the process of hearing, just lending your ears in hearing the glories of Krishna. Prabhupada said reading is also hearing. So reading and hearing, that is the perfection. That is how we can achieve the perfection in this age of Kali Yuga. It's the greatest blessing, the greatest benediction. So no matter how degraded, how inauspicious, how devastating the world is around us, just the opportunity to hear the glories of Krishna, his devotees, that is perfection, that is pure, that is the highest perfection. And simply if we continue doing this, Satatam Kirta Yontama, constantly hearing the glories of the Bhagavatam, we will achieve perfection without fail. Prabhupada is guaranteeing, the glories are guaranteeing, Lord Chaitanya is guaranteeing, the Acharyas are guaranteeing. We have one guarantee after another. So there is no shortcoming in the process. It is simply on us to develop a taste to hearing and chanting, to develop a taste in service. And more important than developing a taste in service is developing a taste in the greatest of all services, hearing and chanting. When we have developed a taste to hear and chant, we should know that we are blessed. Because the hearing and chanting, when it goes into our ears, through our ears to the heart, it will purify. It'll do whatever is required. The holy name in Krishna, the pastimes will do whatever is required. We don't know what's required. We don't know how much contamination is there. But when the glories of Krishna enter our heart, Shrinatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtan, this auspicious hearing, when it enters into the heart, then whatever abhadrani, whatever inauspiciousness will be purified, will be cleansed. And in this way, our heart will become lighter. Our consciousness will become more focused. So that when our plane is ready to fly, we are able to meditate on the lotus feet of Krishna and keep our mind, dharana, retained, focused there. Dhara, retained. And that way, achieve perfection and return home back to Godhead in the internal service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 15th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, titled Pandavas Retire Timely. Vantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Go Brahmande Hari Hari. Are there any questions or comments anyone has? Please share that in the chat. Amavati Vadika says, thank you very much for sharing the divine nectar Srimad Bhagavatam, so beautiful, beautiful and precious. Hare Krishna Jai Srila Prabhupada. Yes, thank you very much for your feedback and association as well. It is all Srila Prabhupada, all credits go to Srila Prabhupada for giving us such wonderful purports. If it wasn't for his purports, we would definitely not be enlightened. Shamananda Prabhu said, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks for a wonderful class again today. Really important lessons from the Pandavas and Vidura. Srila Prabhupada's example of flying our own plane is really spot on. Yes, we've heard this, the turtle analogy once before, and it's 100% showing how rare our life in a human form, in a human body coincides with the touch of a powerful person like Srila Prabhupada. Is there somewhere you read or heard this analogy? Yes. So this analogy, I've heard it a few times, shared by a few of my Shiksha gurus. I remember Amarendra Prabhu was one of them that shared it. So few devotees, I heard it from few devotees. Definitely. And in fact, there's also a verse. The verse is not as elaborate in terms of the analogy, but there are many verses. Even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's that verse, Brahmande Brahmatekon Guru Krishna Prasade by Bhakti Lata Beach. After going through billions and billions and billions of lifetimes from one Brahmanda to another, from one position to another, from one planet to another, from one birth to another, from one situation to another. That person, Guru Krishna Prasade by Bhakti Lata Beach, that person who gets the seed of devotion by the mercy of the Guru, that person is Bhagyavan. It's very, very fortunate. So we have received the seed of devotion, seed of the Bhakti Lata by Srila Prabhupada. Every one of us have come in contact, have this good fortune. Now we have to understand the good fortune and understand and open this good fortune, this treasure house of good fortune, this Bhakti Lata, open it, contemplate on it, delve on it, think about it. Why have I received this Bhakti Lata Beach? What should I do with this Bhakti Lata Beach? What is the glory if I water this Bhakti Lata? What will happen? Will it give me what I'm looking for, what I've been searching for throughout this universe, is wandering from one position to another, searching for that which will satisfy me completely? Will it give me that? So that is what we need to contemplate on through Prabhupada's guidance, through Prabhupada's instructions. And when we now become convinced, yes, this is what, not only me, this is what every living entity is searching for. Then we can appreciate how fortunate, how blessed we are. And then we can try to bless others with this good fortune. We can only bless others with good fortune when we appreciate and understand our good fortune. Then we can share this good fortune with others. Thank you, Bhavan Prabhu. Bhavana Prabhu says, Madhachani Siddhi says, thank you, Prabhu, for this beautiful class. How can we develop taste to hear and chant? So one way to develop taste to hear and chant is to chant, hear and chant. Prabhupada says the result of chanting is more chanting. The result of hearing is more chanting, more hearing. So one way is to develop a habit, a regular habit of hearing. Now, if you go to YouTube, and let's say, for example, you want to hear about Lord Chaitanya, and you type pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, there will be so many. You go to ISKCON Desire Tree, audios section, and you type Lord Chaitanya, and there's tons. That's the blessing of Kali Yuga's internet. We have absolutely no idea how fortunate we are to have the internet. I mean, just consider right now, you're sitting in your own home, in the comfort of your own home, and you hearing me thousands of miles away through the internet. This is inconceivable. In the previous time, if you wanted to hear about the glories of Krishna, you had to go out of your house, out of your comfort zone, to a temple. Prior to that, you had to go to the Himalayas. Imagine now if we had to go to the Himalayas. I'm in South Africa. How am I going to go to the Himalayas? Impossible task. But now with scientific advancement, our good fortune is that I can be right in my home and I can hear the glories of Krishna. So no excuse of traveling. Okay. Thank you, Krishna. We can thank Krishna again and again and again. Thank you for the internet and the applications that allow us to hear the glories. Now I may search and there may be so many speakers. So find that speaker. So remember, every speaker that glorifies Krishna, that speaker is glorious. But find the speaker that resonates with you. See, it's not that all speakers will resonate, because we all individuals and we're resonating with different frequencies. So we want to find that speaker that can resonate with our frequency. So you go and you listen to his lectures regularly. In that way, now because the obstacle of our conditioning can stop us, or our conditioning can stop us from hearing. And there's unlimited, genuine, sincere speakers glorifying the Supreme Lords, Krishna Katha. But because of our conditioning, it may not resonate. So then we think, I don't like to hear this. See? So rather, to avoid that obstacle, find a speaker that can resonate with your frequency of reception, at least in the beginning. So that way you start developing a taste. Because now you like that person, you like to hear that person. So that way you start to absorb. It's going in, and that way you become purified. When you become completely purified, then you'll be able to listen to anyone. Even a new bhakta, if he says, Krishna is the supreme personality of God, and in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says he is God. You are not this body, you spirit soul, you should chant Hare Krishna. You will find that just when they're speaking, even if it's bhakta who joined day number 1, that speech or that glory will be so nectarian to your heart, you'll faint in ecstasy, because your heart is fully purified due to receiving or hearing more and more and more. So like that, develop that. Then we can cultivate and train our consciousness, convince our intellect and consciousness why we want to hear the glories of Krishna. Because in the beginning, I may not have taste. Like Rupa Goswami says, jaundice, I'm afflicted with avidya, the jaundice of avidya. And the only cure is sugar candy. The only cure is sugar candy, which is bitter. So I need to force myself to hear the glories. So that way I need to train and cultivate why I need to hear. Prabhupada is instructing us to hear. I need to follow Prabhupada's instructions. And then I can also hear Prabhupada's lectures that are recorded. Pure sound vibration by the pure devotee, coming from his heart with pure devotion, going in directly into our ears. Very, very purifying, very powerful. Then I can render devotional service with sincerity, because that also purifies my heart to purify me to hear. So these are a few tips on how to develop a taste in hearing and chanting. Bafana Prabhu says, which of the two words, is it sustained or retained? I found the word sustained more like keeping onto the process of cultivation till flight takes off, with that sustained focus and cultivated mindset. Am I thinking correctly of these two words? So sustaining means I need to keep holding on. Retaining or retained means, for example, past tense, already retained. The Pandavas were on the path, or rather, let's say they were with Krishna, and through associating with Krishna, cultivating the proper Krishna consciousness, they were sustaining their Krishna consciousness. Now, when the flight is ready to take off, it's going to test whether you're retaining your Krishna consciousness. So now, how you sustained your Krishna consciousness constantly, regularly, therefore, the advice is to regularly, daily chant, hear. So we're sustaining our Krishna consciousness through constant practice, constant association. Why? So that when the flight takes off, it's going to test how well have I sustained the process to retain the Krishna consciousness, my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. So both can be used, both are important. I want to sustain my Krishna consciousness to keep Krishna retained in my mind. That's the goal. Why? Because the mind, as soon as I think, I'm sure everyone, even I have perfect realization of when I'm chanting, my mind goes to my work, my mind goes here, my mind goes there, mind goes everywhere. Consider when you're sleeping. See, if you really want to be how Krishna conscious we are, just think of what you think of when you go sleep. The challenge is, firstly, many people forget what they think of at the time of sleeping, which means that's even more ignorance, that I don't even know what I'm thinking of. That's how disengaged I am from reality. But very often I can remember my dreams, especially in the early hours, and I can definitely tell you, well, there are times, most of the times, that they're not Krishna conscious. So if they're not Krishna conscious, that means that's what's inside. I'm not able to have Krishna conscious dreams because deep in my psyche, in my heart, in my consciousness, it is not Krishna conscious. Therefore, I can't retain my mind on Krishna. And I need to pray and beg Krishna, please, my Lord, help me. I'm fallen, I'm a rascal, I'm inflicted with so many material desires. Without your help, I cannot keep my mind on your lotus feet, on hearing the holy name. Please help. So that dependence on Krishna has to be there. And when that dependence is there, then I leave it up to the Lord, how the Lord wants to help. And if the sincerity is there, that will attract Krishna, that will attract Prabhupada. Yeah. So both words can be used. I want to sustain my Krishna consciousness so that at the time of death, I'm able to sustain that practice by retaining the holy name on my consciousness, on my mind, with my mind. Nonetheless, I hope that sheds some little light there on the two words from my limited realization and understanding. Mother Lash says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thanks for such a transcendental class today. It's an eye-opener to realize that it is our duty to everyone in our family to share the flying our own plane analogy. I use to disassociate from bad association to protect my bhakti kripa, but I suppose we are convinced and nothing can deviate you no matter what. Thanks for helping me understand that. Yes, we should not disassociate. See, we can keep a healthy distance. We should associate, but not give them our heart. In this regard, I can share the analogy of, Prabhupada gave the analogy of the crocodile and the monkey. The monkey was on the tree, and the crocodile was swimming in the lake. So the crocodile came to the monkey and said, hey, you want a tour? I can take you nice tour, very nice scenery, very serenic and wonderful scenery, places that are there you haven't seen, right? And the monkey said, no, come, I take you. Free. Just jump on my back and I take you. So the monkey thought, yeah, I haven't seen this nice lake scenery. Good idea. Let me jump. Free ride. Okay. So he jumped on the crocodile's back and crocodile started taking him into the river, deeper and deeper into the lake and river. So then after a while, the monkey said, so where are you taking me? And the crocodile say, I'm taking you home so my wife can take your heart out and we can have it for supper. And the monkey immediately said, oh, why didn't you tell me? I forgot my heart on the tree. Let's go quickly, get my heart, and we can go. Now, obviously, crocodile, maybe he's got a tiny brain. He was thinking, well, that's a good idea. If he doesn't have a brain, what are we gonna have for supper? He has to have his brain. So let me take him back. So then crocodile took him back to the tree. Monkey jumped on the tree. And the crocodile said, so you got your brain, let's go. And the monkey said, no, thank you. So Prabhupada gave this example, analogy, right? Meaning you can associate with the crocodile. Oh, sorry, it wasn't a brain. Something of a brain. It was the heart. So the crocodile said, I'm taking you home so my wife can take your heart out and we can have it for supper. So then the monkey said, oh, I forgot my heart on my tree. Forgot my heart on the tree. Let's go back to the tree and get my heart. So in this way, Prabhupada said, you can associate with the crocodile, but don't give it your heart. So we can associate with family members, we can associate with other people to share Krishna consciousness, to share our heart. Our heart is with Krishna. We don't expect them to become convinced and give their heart to Krishna. They can give their heart to whoever who they want. They're free. Krishna is given that free choice, so you're free. But at least I can share where my heart lies and why my heart lies in Krishna. And we can do it through the example of flying the plane. So we don't need to go into the details. It's our duty to share the example of flying the plane. Why? Because every single one of them, whether they're Christians, Muslim, Buddhists, Jews, atheists, you name it, animal, bees, birds, insects, reptile, humans, doesn't matter. Famous, not famous, poor, rich, educated, not educated, doesn't matter. Suffering, not suffering, doesn't matter. Healthy, not healthy, doesn't matter. Every one of us are going to die. That fact, no one can refuse. Oh, you're a Christian, you're going to die? Yeah. You're Indian, you're going to die? Yep. Okay. So death is like flying the plane. Every one of us are going to die. Every one of us is going to fly the plane. Now, when you fly the plane, nobody can help you. That means when you're dying, you're on your own. Now, before death comes, I just need to tell you how to fly your plane, what you need to do. So this is all about flying the plane, and this is what you need to do. Now, it's up to you. Do you want to go into the cockpit, the simulation and simulate and practice and try and train yourself? Or you just want to ignore it and say, don't worry, man. It's okay. I don't think this plane is going to lift off. Okay, that's up to you. I did my duty. I'm sharing, I did my duty. If you need any help while we're on the ground, I'm here to help you, but I've did my duty. So that way, at least we have done our share. And whenever we get an opportunity, we remind them, because sometimes we forget. Even we forgot many times, billions of times. But Krishna didn't say, previous 200 billion, trillion lifetimes I've reminded you. This life, I'm never going to remind you. Krishna never says that. Krishna sends his pure devotees. Krishna comes again and again. He reminds us. He makes arrangements. He reminds us. So like that, we also should keep reminding those who are innocent, those who are sincere, those who want to hear. In that way, by reminding, just like I'm speaking, not for you. I'm really speaking for me. I'm reminding myself of Prabhupada's instructions for my own benefit, for my own purification, so that I can advance in Krishna consciousness. So really, we reminding ourselves. When we speak to others, it's really about reminding ourselves, and we're taking that opportunity. And if they benefited, then really there is those credits all go to Srila Prabhupada. Why? Because it is his knowledge that we're sharing. It's not my wisdom, not my education. I came empty-handed in this world with no knowledge, just crying like a baby. Prabhupada has given us the wisdom. Thank you very much for everyone's kind attention and association. We will continue with the next chapter. Now we are entering into Maharaj Parikshit's life. Another amazing personality. And we're going to, Bhagavatam is really about Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami. So now we're entering into those chapters of Maharaj Parikshit. What he went through, what he did, and the questions that he had to churn. Just consider, he had 7 days. He could have said, okay, I got 7 days. Sukadeva Goswami, can we, how about maybe 8 to 9 every day? We can hear Krishna Katha, is that okay? So he gave a slot, 8 to 9, Krishna Katha. Nope. He decided 7 days, 7 nights, no interruption. That's a powerful lesson for us. Powerful lesson for us. So we are now going to enter into his life, and so many lessons he's going to churn one pastime after another. And Prabhupada is going to be giving from all the different pastimes that we're going to hear, all the different lessons that we're going to hear, so that we can mold our life, we can become more convinced about Krishna consciousness, so that ultimately we can perfect our life. And if we perfect our life, we bless everyone around us. We will become a blessing. Fana Prabhu says, if the class can be given again from the start, I'll join in. Yes, that's the taste we want to cultivate. To hear again and again and again. And this is the beauty, that something that Prabhupada said in his purport, something that I said from Reem Prabhupada's purport, must have gone deep and struck a chord. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's important. That means my consciousness has gone to a higher level, higher frequency. My conviction has gone to a higher level. My faith has gone to a higher level. This means you're not the same person that we started at 4 o'clock. You're a different person. And which now implies that if I go through this class again, if I read Prabhupada's purports again, I'm reading his purports, I'm hearing the Krishna Katha as a different individual. That means my experience will be different. In fact, my experience will be higher because I've raised my consciousness. And in this way, if I keep raising more and more and more, I'm going from the lower modes of passion and ignorance higher and higher to the mode of goodness, and then eventually to the mode of pure goodness, and then Krishna Katha becomes ecstatic. Yeah, becomes totally blissful. I will forget about eating, sleeping, and simply drinking the nectar of Krishna Katha through our years. So that day will come one day by the mercy of Krishna. We simply have to struggle to hear Krishna Katha. Bafana Prabhu says, thank you for providing the shelter of the classes. They become my escape from the onslaught of material anxiety. After all the classes, I have my own time for Srimad Bhagavatam. It's my anxiety to hear correctly, and you're empowering gradually. Yours empowering gradually. Yes. We should not be having association once only. We want to do it regularly, every day. At least it can start once, but then regularly I want to hear. And in that way, we will become purified. Thank you again for everyone's feedback and association. We will end here and continue next week. Kvantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai, O Pramanande, Hari Hari.